Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching us from? I'd love to know which cities we have here tonight. And if you enjoy real, heartfelt stories like this one, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really helps us keep sharing more true-to-life tales with you. All right, let's begin. I remember that morning as if it happened yesterday. The office was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that hums just below the sound of the fluorescent lights. My name's Claire, and I'd worked at Wilson & Hart Consulting for nearly 9 years. Long enough to know that when my boss, Daniel Hart himself, asked to see me in his office, it could mean anything from a new project to a polite but firm conversation about performance. The email had been short, just a few words. "Claire, could you stop by my office before lunch?" No exclamation mark, no subject line. Simple. Direct. My stomach knotted the moment I read it. I tried to stay focused, reviewing my client reports while sipping my now lukewarm coffee. Daniel's office was on the top floor, with tall glass windows overlooking the city. He wasn't the kind of man who raised his voice. Instead, he had this calm, measured way of speaking that could make even a compliment sound like a challenge. When I finally stood outside his door, I could hear the faint buzz of the city below. I knocked lightly. "Come in," he said. Daniel was standing near the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled up. The light fell across his desk, catching a few streaks of gray in his dark hair. He looked thoughtful, not angry, just deep in thought. That somehow made me even more nervous. "Morning, Claire. Have a seat," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. I sat down, trying to keep my hands from fidgeting. "I wanted to talk about something important," he began, his voice steady. "You've been with this company a long time. You've seen it grow, adapt, stumble, and rise again. And through it all, you've been constant. Dependable." I wasn't sure what to say. A thank you? A nervous laugh? Instead, I just nodded. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't his usual professional smile. This one was quieter, almost uncertain. "I realized recently," he continued, "that we don't take enough time to acknowledge what people like you bring to the table. Not just the work, but the heart behind it." His words caught me off guard. I wasn't used to Daniel speaking this personally. Usually, he talked in metrics, projections, timelines. Now, he sounded almost reflective. He gestured toward the window. "You see that view? I look out there every day and think about how much this company depends on people who give more than they're asked to. You're one of those people, Claire, but I also know you've been carrying more than your share lately." Something inside me tightened. He knew. He must have seen the exhaustion I'd tried to hide, the late nights, the way I'd quietly picked up extra work after a colleague left. For months, I'd been telling myself to just push through. That's what professionals do. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "When was the last time you took a real break?" I almost laughed. A real break? I can't remember. He nodded, as if that confirmed something for him. That's what I thought. Then came the pause, the kind of silence that feels like a decision forming in the air. "Claire," he said softly, "you've been taking care of everyone else here. The team, the clients, even me sometimes. But you haven't been taking care of yourself. And I can't let that continue. Not if I value you the way I say I do." The words hit me deeper than I expected. I didn't know how to respond. "I want you to take the next 2 weeks off," he said finally. "No emails. No calls. Just rest. Get out of the city if you can. You've earned it." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. I blinked. "You want me to take time off?" "Yes. And not as a favor. As something you deserve. You've been holding this place together, Claire. It's time you remember that your own life deserves that same effort. For a moment, I just sat there, speechless. Not because I didn't want the break, but because no one had ever said something like that to me in my entire career. He smiled gently, reading my silence. You've given this company your dedication. Now it's giving you time back. Take it. Come back rested. We'll be fine here. As I left his office, I felt something shift inside me. A strange mix of relief and disbelief. The hallway looked different, somehow lighter. Maybe it was the sunlight reflecting off the glass, or maybe it was just me, finally exhaling. That afternoon, I packed my things early. I told the team I'd be out for a while. Some of them cheered, some looked confused. But as I stepped outside into the cool breeze, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd walked out of that building without a weight on my shoulders. I didn't know what the next 2 weeks would bring. All I knew was that something about that conversation had opened a door I hadn't even realized was locked. And for the first time in years, I felt curious about myself, about what I'd been missing, about what I might still find. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights flicker like quiet stars. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe it was time to stop running on empty. I didn't know it then, but that single conversation, the one that left me speechless, was just the beginning of something I'd been needing for a very long time. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt unseen at your job, or forgotten how much you matter, I want you to stay with me, because what happened next completely changed the course of my life. The first morning of my break, I woke up before my alarm. It felt strange, like my body didn't quite believe it was allowed to rest. The sunlight was spilling through the curtains in soft stripes, catching the dust in the air. Normally, I'd already be scrolling through my emails by then, checking for client messages or urgent updates. But that day, my phone was on the kitchen counter, face down, silent. It was unsettling at first, that quiet. I kept pacing the apartment, unsure of what to do with myself. 9 years of constant movement had made stillness feel almost foreign. I made coffee, sat by the window, and just watched the world go by. I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to in years. The neighbor walking his old dog in a bright red sweater, the sound of wind brushing through the trees, the way the sunlight changed color as it touched different buildings. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Daniel. Hope you're resting, it read. No cheating. The office will survive. I laughed out loud, shaking my head. I started to type a reply, but stopped. He was right. I needed to learn how to step away, even for a while. By the second day, I decided to take a drive. There was a small town about 2 hours away, a place I'd visited once, years ago, for a weekend retreat. It had a small lake, a diner that smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and the kind of quiet that seemed to slow time down. The drive there was freeing in a way I hadn't expected. No deadlines, no meetings, just the hum of the road and the open sky. Somewhere along the way, I caught myself humming a song I didn't even realize I remembered. When I arrived, I checked into a modest inn near the water. The woman at the front desk greeted me with a warm smile and a plate of homemade cookies. "You look like someone who's been working too hard," she said kindly. I smiled back. "You could say that." That evening, I took a walk by the lake. The air smelled faintly of pine and rain, and the reflection of the sunset shimmered across the surface like melted gold. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely unhurried. But even in that calm, my thoughts wandered back to Daniel. Not in a work sense, but in the way you think about someone who surprises you. I kept replaying that moment when he looked me in the eye and told me I mattered. It wasn't something I heard often. Maybe it wasn't something I ever really believed. The next morning, I woke up early again and decided to journal, a habit I hadn't kept since my 20s. The words came slowly at first, but once I started, I couldn't stop. I wrote about everything. The years I'd spent proving myself, the quiet exhaustion that had built up, the feeling of always being needed, but rarely being seen. Somewhere between my sentences, I realized how much of my identity had become wrapped up in my job. I'd built walls around myself made of spreadsheets, deadlines, and performance reviews. Maybe stepping away wasn't about rest. It was about remembering who I was before I became the dependable one. On the third day, I got another message from Daniel. "Claire, I just wanted to check in. Not about work, just to say thank you again for everything you've done. You've made a real difference." I stared at the screen for a long moment. There was no business tone, no formality, just honesty. I typed back, "Thank you. I think I'm finally learning to breathe again." His reply came quickly. "Good. That's all I hoped for." It was such a simple exchange, but it lingered with me all day. His words felt genuine, unguarded. It reminded me that maybe leadership wasn't just about giving orders. It was about giving care. And maybe connection didn't always need to be complicated. As the days passed, I found myself slowing down even more. I took walks, I sat by the water for hours doing nothing. Each day, a little more of the tension I'd been carrying seemed to melt away. One afternoon, I met an older couple sitting on a bench by the lake. They'd been married for over 50 years and came there every summer. We talked for hours about work, about aging, about how life can surprise you even when you think you've seen it all. When I told them I was on a forced vacation from work, the man chuckled. "Sometimes we all need someone to tell us to stop," he said. "Otherwise, we forget how." That night, I thought about that. Maybe Daniel wasn't just being kind. Maybe he'd recognized something in me that I hadn't yet faced myself. The fatigue, the way I kept pushing without purpose. I realized then that his words weren't just about rest. They were a mirror, showing me how far I drifted from myself. On the 7th day, as I sat by the lake watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not excitement, not relief, just quiet peace. And yet, beneath that peace, a new question was forming. What happens when I go back? What if I return to the same desk, the same routine, and lose this feeling again? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Something inside me had begun to change. The call to return would come soon enough. And when it did, I suspected it wouldn't just be about work anymore. Because sometimes the most unexpected conversations don't end when you walk out of the office. They echo gently in the choices you make long after. By the time my 2 weeks were nearly over, I had changed more than I could have imagined. The stillness that once felt awkward had turned into something I craved. I'd learned to sit with my thoughts, to listen to the sound of my own breathing, to pay attention to the world around me. The lake had become like a friend, steady, patient, always there. I'd walk its path every morning with a cup of coffee, stopping by the same old bench where the older couple and I had talked. Each day, the colors around me deepened, the greens more vivid, the sky softer somehow. But as my return date crept closer, a sense of unease began to build. I wasn't sure I wanted to go back, not because I disliked my job. I'd always taken pride in it, but because I was afraid of slipping back into the version of myself who had been running on autopilot for years. On my last full day there, I received an email from Daniel. The subject line simply read, "Checking in." I hesitated before opening it. "Hi Claire," it said. "I hope you're feeling better. Things at the office are going smoothly, but I have to admit, it feels different without you here. I wanted to let you know we're all looking forward to having you back. There's something I'd like to discuss with you when you return. Don't worry, it's good news. Enjoy your last few days of peace." My curiosity sparked immediately. Something he wanted to discuss? Good news. I couldn't help but wonder what that meant. That night, I sat by the lake under a sky so clear it looked like 1,000 tiny lanterns floating above me. I thought about how much one conversation could change the rhythm of a person's life. I realized that Daniel had seen something in me before I saw it myself, a kind of quiet breaking point, and instead of pushing me harder, he'd given me space to find my balance again. That kind of understanding wasn't common in the business world. It came from empathy, maybe even wisdom. The next morning, I packed up my things and drove home. The highway stretched endlessly, and I found myself thinking about how roads always seem to lead back to the places that shape us, whether we're ready or not. When I arrived at the office the following Monday, everything looked the same, the coffee machine humming, the sound of keyboards clicking, the faint murmur of morning chatter. But something felt different. It was me. I was walking in with a clearer head and a lighter heart. Daniel's assistant greeted me warmly. "He asked to see you when you arrived," she said. For a moment, I laughed under my breath. Of course he did. When I knocked on his door, he looked up immediately, smiling in that calm, measured way I'd come to know so well. "Welcome back, Claire," he said. "You look rested." "I feel rested," I admitted, taking a seat across from him. "Though I have to say, it feels strange to be back." He nodded thoughtfully. "I expected that. Sometimes when we step away, we come back seeing things more clearly." He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a moment before continuing. "I wanted to talk to you about the next phase of your work here. Over the last few months, I've been thinking about how much this company has changed, and how much we need people who understand not just the work, but the people behind it." He paused. "I want you to lead a new initiative. Something focused on mentorship, training, and employee well-being. You have a gift for empathy, Claire. You notice things others miss. That's not something you can teach. It's something you live." For a second, I couldn't find the words. The idea of leading something so meaningful caught me off guard. "I don't know what to say," I finally murmured. "Say yes," he said gently. "Not because it's more work, but because it's the right kind of work. You've earned the chance to make this place better, not just for clients, but for the people who walk through these doors every day." Something in his voice softened, as if this meant more to him than just a business decision. I took a deep breath. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'll do it." His smile deepened. "Good. I knew you would." As I left his office, I felt that same sense of surprise I'd felt weeks ago, the feeling of life shifting under my feet in ways I hadn't expected. Over the next few days, I threw myself into shaping the new program. I spoke with employees about their experiences, listened to their frustrations, their hopes. Many had stories that mirrored my own: years of dedication, quiet fatigue, a longing to feel valued beyond their productivity. It wasn't easy, but it felt real. Every conversation reminded me that we all carry invisible weight, and sometimes all it takes is one person's attention to help lighten the load. One evening, as I was packing up to leave, I saw Daniel standing by the window again, just as he had that first day. The city lights reflected against the glass, painting him in gold and shadow. He turned when he heard me and smiled. "You've changed the energy around here, Claire. People are talking more, laughing more. You did that." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. Maybe I just reminded them to breathe. He nodded. Sometimes that's all leadership really is. As I walked out of his office that evening, I realized something profound. That first meeting, the one that left me speechless, hadn't just been about a break. It had been a beginning. The beginning of understanding that sometimes the most powerful transformations don't happen in moments of success, but in moments of pause. And somewhere between the quiet lake and the hum of the city lights, I had learned to pause, to listen, to really see. Little did I know, though, that one more moment was waiting ahead. Something that would test everything I had just rediscovered about myself and what truly mattered. A few weeks had passed since Daniel asked me to lead the new initiative. Life at the office had taken on a rhythm that felt more human, more alive. People were talking again, not just about numbers and clients, but about balance, about purpose. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just working. I was contributing to something that felt meaningful. But then, one gray Thursday afternoon, something unexpected happened. Daniel called another meeting. The message was simple: "Claire, can you stop by my office?" The same words that had started this entire journey. My heart gave a small, familiar flutter. When I walked in, he was once again by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out over the city. The sky outside was heavy with clouds, and the reflection of the lights below shimmered faintly on the glass. "Come in," he said quietly. "Close the door." I did. There was a stillness in the room that made me think of endings and beginnings all at once. He turned to me and smiled. But this time, it wasn't the calm, confident smile I was used to. It was softer, almost hesitant. "I wanted to tell you this in person," he began. "I've made a decision. I'm stepping down as managing partner." For a moment, I just stared at him. "You're what?" He nodded slowly. "It's been coming for a while. I've been thinking about it since before our first conversation, actually. I realized I've spent so much time building this place that I forgot to ask myself what I was building it for. Seeing you take that time off, watching you come back with a new sense of clarity, made me realize I needed that too." I sank into the chair, speechless again, just like the first time he'd called me in. He continued, "You reminded me of something important, that this place isn't just about the work we do, but about the lives we live while doing it. And maybe I'm ready to live a little again." His voice carried a kind of peace that I recognized instantly. It was the same peace I'd found at the lake, the kind that comes when you stop running and finally let yourself be still. "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered. He smiled. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll keep what we started going. Keep reminding people that their lives matter as much as their work." I nodded, my throat tight. "I promise." He walked around the desk and rested his hand lightly on the back of my chair. "You know," he said, "when I first asked you to take that time off, I thought I was helping you. But maybe you helped me more than I realized." His words hung in the air between us, full of gratitude and understanding. After that day, things moved quickly. Daniel announced his retirement at the next company meeting. There were tears, laughter, applause. He spoke about legacy, about trust, about how the company would be in good hands with the people he believed in most. And when he said my name, introducing me as the new director of the Employee Development Program, I felt something stir inside me, a quiet pride. Not the loud kind that comes from achievement, but the deep kind that comes from knowing you've found your place. Weeks later, after Daniel officially stepped away, he sent me one last message. "Claire, I'm by the lake you told me about. You were right. The sunsets here are something else. Take care of them, the people, the work, and yourself." I smiled as I read it, imagining him standing by the same water where I'd once rediscovered my own reflection. Life at the office continued, but I carried his lessons with me every day. I checked in with my team not just about deadlines, but about how they were really doing. I encouraged them to take time off, to pause when needed, to live fully beyond the walls of the company. And in quiet moments, when the city outside my window glowed in that familiar golden light, I thought back to the first time Daniel had called me into his office. How nervous I'd been. How certain I was that I was about to be scolded or overlooked again. Instead, it had become the start of everything good that followed. One conversation. One unexpected act of understanding. That's all it took to turn exhaustion into renewal and work into purpose. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the most life-changing moments